What's going on, everybody? Eric Helms here. Sorry for the drought of anecdotes and observations, but welcome back to Anecdotes and Observations. This is Aous, pronounced Aous. And we're on episode 12. This is just a solo episode with me. I'm done traveling for a little bit until I won't be, which is later. But for now, you just got me monologuing once again like the old school Aous roots. And today I want to talk about basically improving your engine. This episode is all about critical thinking, making better decisions, and what it means to be evidence-based. So in this video, we're going to be talking about evaluating not only your own thought process, but the thought process of others, so you can follow people who are more likely to help you build your critical thinking skills and get a better objective view of fitness evidence-based information. So before we can really dive into that, basically a reminder of what evidence-based practice is and why this whole anecdotes and observations video is important in the first place, or the series I should say. So evidence-based practice originally started in medicine, and it's something that in the last couple of years we've become more conscious of seeing as the paradigm with which we operate as evidence-based practitioners in fitness is a three-legged stool, if you will. One being the actual scientific research, the PubMed studies that we often cite. Two is our clinical experience, so our experiences as either a lifter or a coach or something else. And then finally is the individual preferences, needs, and individual differences of our clients and their values. So in evidence-based practice, these are all seen as equally important. And the whole reason I've made anecdotes and observations is because we've probably overemphasized the research leg of that stool to where the way we discuss things, the actual underlying critical thinking skills have been de-emphasized compared to just having knowledge. And that's a problem because with great knowledge becomes great power, and with great power comes great responsibility. And everyone's a Spider-Man fan, and if Spider-Man did not have great responsibility, he would probably be a supervillain, and we have a major problem. So what I mean by that is that knowledge alone does not help you help others in the most effective way. Rather, how you communicate that knowledge, how you communicate with others, and your underlying ability to assess knowledge and assess knowledge that's being shared by someone else, like me in this example, is really, really important. And it's de-emphasized. So what we're going to be talking about in this video are some very practical ways that you can evaluate people you're following, and you can evaluate your own thought processes and your own behaviors when you're in the middle of a discussion with someone. Because it's not just about facts. The reality is that as a scientist, if I want to publish a study, communication is incredibly important. I have to communicate with research participants about what the study is and to get them to volunteer when I recruit them. I have to communicate with an ethics board to get my study approved. I have to communicate with my co-authors about the way we're going to write the study, the way we're going to do it, and then I have to communicate during peer review to actually get that study published. And then finally, either me or someone else who wants to interpret and report the results of my study and then what they mean, they have to communicate with an audience. So while I think it is very important for all of you folks out there who are either trying to help yourselves or your clients with interpreting science-based information by doing things like subscribing to research reviews, reading studies, even just if you're reading the abstracts, or following the various members out there in the community who are trying to put out science-based information, be wary that if you're only focused on the actual accumulation of knowledge, you're not doing a whole lot for yourself, and you're not making yourself better at assessing information as it comes to you. So you're going to have a lot of chinks in your armor, and you want to be cautious with doing that and only focusing on that output. A much more valuable practice is building your ability to critically analyze things. So science is all based on the scientific method, which comes from the practice of being a critical thinker. And being a critical thinker is all about being a rational skeptic. So all these words that I'm throwing around basically means that we have to suspend many of our natural instincts when evaluating information and when discussing information with others, which is really how humans learn, that oral tradition. So what does that mean? It means that we have to be self-disciplined all the time if we want to be someone who is a critical thinker and who follows a scientific attitude or method in their mind of trying to find objective truths from the information we have. So that means that we have to behave differently than normal. because the way people typically discuss things, especially when they argue, is they try to find the weaknesses in the other person's arguments, they point them out, they ignore when they make good points, and they take the worst possible interpretation of what the other person says to make them look bad and to quote-unquote win the argument. Now, this is a great way to get elected into office. This is a great way to get a lot of likes and laughs on Facebook. And also, this is a great way just to appear more intelligent than you actually are. There's actually research out there showing that negative critiques are perceived as more intelligent than positive critiques, even when one is, by an outside observer who's an expert in a field, judged to be of the same or even greater relevance to the book. So we know that people perceive negative critiques as you being more intelligent. We know it's a lot easier to debunk something and tear it down than to create something. So this leaves a space for quote-unquote evidence-based individuals to just critique things, debunk, and myth bust without actually generating any content and without actually engaging with people in a way that actually teaches critical thinking and teaches a evidence-based attitude and the scientific method. So most of us who want to get into this field of being more evidence-based and being more rational and using objective truths to guide our training or our nutrition or our health start by following others. I know when I first came up in the game and I first started valuing my education and I said, you know what, maybe I could help others by sharing information, I started to look to the same folks who others are looking up to at that time, other people who were putting out great information, who were sharing science, and who are incorporating scientific methods into bodybuilding and powerlifting. And those were my models. Those were the people who I kind of fashioned myself after. And over the years, as I've gone through formal education and as I've read and thought about thinking, I have changed the way I've presented things, and I hope that that's had a positive impact on the people who follow me. Now, what that means is that if your first exposures to this new way of thinking are perhaps science-based but not really critical thinkers or evidence-based at their core, they can lead you astray, and they can lead you towards practices which get you further from the truth. So you need to know both what behaviors to modulate for yourself and to pay attention to so you can get around your own preconceived biases, so you can lead with a desire to seek the truth or help others versus your own ego by not only moderating that in yourself, but also watching out for it in others and choosing to follow, support, and engage with people who also have that same commitment to finding the truth and to being evidence-based and to being a critical thinker. So I'm going to give you some practical tools in this video of things to watch out for, mostly in yourself, but also in others if you're in that stage where you're trying to see, well, how do I do this whole thing? And a really important concept is what's called the principle of charity. Now, the principle of charity is a principle used in rational discourse. And it's basically, like I said, the opposite of what most people do when they discuss things with others, especially when they're in disagreement. And the idea of the principle of charity is to take the most rational and strongest interpretation of what the other person says and repeat it back to them and assume that's what they mean. So instead of trying to pick out all the flaws in their argument, ignoring the good points and then highlighting the negatives and then misinterpreting them purposefully so you can win a debate, it's more about trying to find mutually what the closest thing to the truth is. So if you assume the strongest position, the strongest argument, and the most charitable, that's where the principle comes from, interpretation of what they are saying, assuming that they actually have some point to be made, you're coming from a position of saying, I haven't already made up my mind, I'm open to new evidence, and I'm not valuing being right as much as I am being correct, if that makes sense. I'm trying to mutually seek the truth with you rather than beat you in some online internet owning match, okay? So how do we do that? Well, it means that every time someone posts, every time we respond, and every time we interact with other people, and every time we critically analyze either research or an article or a concept we hear about, when I'm in a Q&A, when I get asked questions at conferences, when I'm engaged in Facebook discussions, etc., I do my best, and I'm definitely not always successful, but it's always in the back of my mind to try to apply the principle of charity, trying to take their question in the strongest light, so that it gives me the opportunity to perhaps see where I might be wrong or where I could be interpreting something based on a preconceived bias. So it's really important to do this. It's not just about being nice. It actually has very little to do with being nice. And it has to do with having a stance of saying, I don't know everything. This isn't just about my ego. And it's not about my current beliefs. It's about finding out what is true. And if you watch someone and they consistently use ad hominem attacks, attacking someone's perceived motives, their character, or elements of their argument that are not related to their point, or especially if they purposely misinterpret things, or ignore points, or misconstrue, or bring in outside arguments, or try to get the person to emotionally respond by being harsh, cruel, negative, or having a tone that is dismissive or condescending. If you see any of those behaviors, you know one of two things. One, they've either already made up their mind, they're not open to any other possibilities of what's being true to be the case, which is inherently not evidence-based. Or two, they actually don't believe what they're saying, and they don't think that it has the legs to stand on its own with the weight of the evidence, and they have to use these other tactics to try to denigrate the other person or to dissuade others so that they can hold on to face their ego or their belief that they're right, either consciously or subconsciously. So when you see those behaviors regularly, sometimes it's fine. We all get triggered. We all get angry. We all have strong beliefs sometimes, and we're not always able to self-moderate ourselves. Again, these are our natural instincts to act in this way. So if someone loses self-discipline occasionally, sure, that's fine. And I'm mostly saying that for the few times that I think I've done this to not have you turn away from me. So we're all human is what I'm getting at. But if someone is regularly engaging in this manner, I would say that at their core, regardless of what type of information they share or whether they're interested in science or whether they have science-based approaches, they're not modeling critical thinking, they're not modeling evidence-based behavior, and they're not doing the best job they can to seek the truth. It probably has a little more to do with their ego than it does actually helping others. So that's something to watch out for. But most importantly, that's something to moderate in yourself. Try to apply the principle of charity when you discuss things with other people. That's the way you're going to best be able to identify the anecdotes that are going to help you. That's the best way that you're going to be able to take all these observations that are out there and all these confusing and sometimes conflicting nutritional strategies, training strategies, and all the things that we hear out there because we can't study everything, and take a more rigorous approach to figuring out with the other experts in the community or people just starting out or other athletes what might be the best approach. So don't think it's just about being nice. It's definitely not. It's about finding a way to collectively, with other people of the same interests, trying to find optimal ways to improve their health and fitness to get the best outcome. So that's all I got for you today. This has been a discussion on how to be more rational, how to build your critical thinking skills, and how to do that in conversations with others with the principle of charity. So I'll see you next time on Aous. Aous!